Thanks, Nadia. Hi, everyone. I can't tell you how great it is to see so many people here for a project that I've been working on for 3 years now. So this is a little bit of a component, a little bit of a taste of what my PhD has been looking at, and in specific, what are the design factors that make a social marketing game work and work well? And we're talking a lot today about how can we use commercial principles, but how can we use them in a way that actually benefits social society? So I'll be tapping on a bit of that as well. So what's the value of researching mobile games? So a long time ago when I started with my supervisors, I'm an avid gamer, and I was like, how can I use my habits or something that I enjoy to bring about social change rather than just sitting in the dungeon of my room playing games? So in the marketplace, there's a high smartphone ownership, as we know. And in Australia, particularly, it's going to become to the point that there's nearly going to be 2 smartphones per person. And that's also led to a large M-gamer market. So for a lot of you that have your smartphones, when you're sitting on transport, filling up some of your spare time, you're playing games like Angry Birds, or you're playing games like Candy Crush or Words with Friends. But as well as that, it's now being explored as a tool in social marketing with a project that I'm working with Professor Rebecca Russell-Bennett, who's in the room with me. So I'll touch on that a little bit too. So mobile games and social marketing practice are now starting to be developed. So a project that has recently been developed and about to be implemented later on this year is the Reduce Your Juice campaign, which is a part of the Australian Federal Government Low Energy Efficiency Program. So what it is aiming to do is trial digital, but in particular a mobile game, to try and change the habits of a household and the electricity consumption. So this was a large project valued at over 6.5 million. A big problem though is that when we were starting this campaign was we didn't know how to develop a social marketing game. What were the design principles that would help us achieve not just only entertainment and produce fun, because a game should be fun, but also have that magic ingredient that changes their behaviour. And as a result of that, when we were going through the development phase, we wasted a huge amount of funding just trying to find out what these principles or what we need to design in this game, leading it to be over about $250,000 in development costs. So this then aligned with my research thesis. So this is a bit of an overview of what my first study looked at. But in particular today, we won't be looking at experiential value, but rather the game attribute side of it. So there was a gap in the knowledge of both academics and practitioners in regarding to knowing what design features are preferred by consumers, but what design features also entertain the user and give them ability to change their behaviour. So when we're looking through the literature and looking what gaming has told us, and there's a lot of literature in the areas of serious games, educational games. I could go on for days and days about the application of games outside of entertainment games. But what we noticed was that there was a huge overlap of existing frameworks or game attributes. People talked about character, they talked about avatar, they talked about feedback, things that sounded exactly the same. And there was just a long list, and we were trawling through trying to find what is this magic ingredient for a social marketing end game that consumers would like for entertainment purposes, but also for the assistance in changing their behaviour. So then we came along and then we tried to synthesize the literature. So remember that when I was looking through the literature, there were many game attribute frameworks. There was over 20 to 30 plus game attribute frameworks that could be applied. And there were many overlapping game attributes as well. But a big problem is that they were only identifying the factors that lead to entertainment creation, so amusing the player. What about the purposes of teaching someone or educating them to change their behaviour? What about simulating a behaviour so that they can learn it in a virtual safe environment so they can perform it out in the real world? These are things we'll touch on in my research findings. So then we went out and we decided to take an all-exploratory research approach because we didn't really know what was really happening with these social marketing end games. And luckily enough, there was already 4 developed out in practice that we could use. So we had 4 focus groups with the sample being 18 to 35 years. We decided upon that because that group was seen to be the group targeted by those social marketing end games as depicted in their descriptions. We used a hybrid coding, inductive and deductive. That means that we use theory and no theory to come up with our categories of themes. And as I said before, we use for social marketing and games, which I'll go into detail now. So a lot of you might be aware of the game Dumb Ways to Die if you're from Australia, a very successful game, social marketing campaign on on train safety. But what many people might not be aware is that there was also a mobile game attached to this. And this game was a social marketing simulation game, I call them, because it actually simulates the safe behaviour or the desired behaviour within the game. So you can see with the little picture there that there's a few characters that you have to pull behind the yellow line, and if you don't pull them behind the yellow line, they die, thus simulating the performance of a desired behaviour. Then you had the two smoking games, My Quit Buddy and Quit For You, Quit For Two, which we now, after going through towards the end of my PhD thesis, categorise as distraction games. So what these try to do is give people a level of challenge or another activity to do rather than perform the undesired behaviour. So in this instance, they try and give players an activity to play the game rather than smoking. So when they crave a cigarette, they actually go and play the game rather than smoke. Then you have another simulation game, City GT, which is a game that you use on your mobile, and it simulates you driving as you use this like a steering wheel. You have a fake phone call that comes up, and depending if you choose to answer the call or decline the call, you can continue driving or you crash and die based upon what you do within choosing that. Pretty brutal stuff, especially for a government game as well. So an overview of the research findings. So I know this might be a bit confronting at the start, but we'll go into in depth throughout the presentation. So we found that there was 3 categories of game attributes: interaction, disguise, and performance. And we'll discuss what those category labels mean in further detail later on. In all, interaction attributes are similar to those all found in games, and we call these interaction because simply those are the ones that interact with our senses. So you think about it, controls, that's your point of touch with the game, how you control the game. You have visuals, which is your sensory, and audio. Interestingly enough, when we were going through our focus groups, participants discussed how sound or audio wasn't really a desired aspect of the game, because when we were sitting there watching them play these games, they simply turned the sound or the audio off. So that's obviously a unique finding in itself, that you don't really have to potentially worry too much about the sound development in your game. We also found disguise game attributes, so they are similar but different when comparing to commercial and social marketing M games. Again, I'll go into that in depth. Then we found the third category, which is unique to social marketing M games, and that is performance, which is made up of virtual training and behaviour monitoring. So going into depth now into the research findings. So we won't actually focus too much on interaction attributes, purely because we going through my research findings, and if you would like to talk to me about it, I can explain more. Interaction wasn't seen to be the magic attributes that really did too much. They were just attributes that were expected to be integrated into the design of the game. But disguise game attributes is where we started to see the magic come through, and especially from a participant perspective as well. So disguise game attributes are challenge, character, and feedback. They are used as an entertainment game attribute, but they also mask the behavioural performance of a game. So when you think about challenge in the Dumb Ways to Die game, a challenge for you is to get your characters behind the yellow line. Therefore, integrating both an entertaining aspect to achieve the challenge, but you're also performing a behavioural aspect of the game as well. So when we talk to respondents, we go, well, what's a good thing about challenge? And they said there needs to be an optimal level of challenge. It can't be too easy and it can't be too hard, because if it's too hard, we'll get annoyed and we won't want to play it. If it's too easy, we'll obviously achieve it quite quickly as well. A really, really interesting finding was in regards to character and the Quit For You, Quit For Two game. Quit For You, Quit For Two targeted pregnant women, and especially when they're vulnerable to smoking. And they use characters quite well because they enabled them to players to form an emotional connection with the player, and then that gave them more motivation to perform a behaviour of not smoking, which was really interesting in itself as well. And as you would expect, feedback or the feedback in regards to giving points or rewards is always optimal for a gamer, and that gives players optimal motivation. If you keep telling them they're doing the right thing, they're reinforcing that behaviour. Feedback can be in 2 ways. So feedback can be through information based on their behaviour inside the game, and other games also have the aspect of giving them feedback on their outside behaviour. So My Quit Buddy and Quit For You, Quit For Two would send feedback in regards to you're doing well, you're trying to quit smoking. So what was different about that we found about social marketing and games was these performance attributes, and these were found to be unique within the literature and something that my PhD is contributing to the social marketing literature. So there was two aspects which also led to two categories of games that aren't discussed in this paper, but another paper coming up. So behaviour monitoring was an aspect which allowed players to actually monitor their own behaviour in the outside world. So when you think about your apps with Nike Plus or other quitting smoking apps, you're allowed to put in your own behaviour and track your behaviour. So you can look at, I smoked 20 cigarettes last week, but this week I only smoked 10. And the game or the app can allow you to track that. And that's consistent with past research too, which has shown that the use of diaries, in this case virtual diaries and behaviour monitoring, enables people to actually monitor their behaviour and perform better behaviours more often. Then we had virtual training. Virtual training looked at the aspects where there were scenarios within the game that actually facilitate a real life behaviour. So if you think about City GT, you're driving along a car and you simulate a call coming in. And based upon answering the call or declining the call, you can actually simulate that behaviour. And again, using the dumb ways to die aspect, you can pull a character behind the line, or you can wait patiently for a train to cross the tracks. What was really interesting too was that in the virtual training aspect, that people actually discussed that they want to see this more often. If they're going to play a social marketing M game, don't just entertain us all the time. We know that there's a purpose behind this, and we would like to see you trying to do something that will change our behaviour. So a quick overview of the research findings. So findings suggest that social marketing M games have similar design to commercial and entertainment games. However, these are used differently, and we should be aware of that as well. So when we talk about game attributes such as character, challenge, and feedback, remember that these can be integrated and used as a disguise to overcome the behavioural focus of the game, and that stops it from appearing to be boring as well. When you think about it, when your children want to play a game, they want to play a game because it's fun, not because it's teaching them something. As well as that, social marketing M games have two additional attributes that are behavioural in focus: behaviour monitoring, virtual training. And as I said, this was an interesting finding was that consumers were open to seeing this integrated into the design of their game. Also have some additional insights as well. So I've just recently finished a confirmatory second study using an online survey of 497 participants. And we're finding that we're actually starting to confirm these findings, that these game attributes can be used as a disguise, with them building both amusement value and behavioural value as well. What was really interesting though from this confirmatory study was that although we had 497 people accept to play the game, we had over 2,500 people actually decline to play the game, which may indicate that not all games work for all people, and it's hard to. We need to now understand how to encourage people to adopt these games and use these games, something that I think after my PhD would be a really valuable area of research. Just a final note too, results from my second study are showing that when we're building value for the player, so this is another paper that I've done, but I just thought I'd give you some insight. Results show that entertainment and behaviour value can influence the intentions of the player. So that again comes back to my point that you can't just simply entertain the player, you actually have to give them some form of value in regards to the behaviour, whether that be simulating the behaviour, giving them information about the behaviour, or having a game that distracts them from performing an undesired behaviour such as smoking. And as I tapped onto as well, that there appears to be categories of games coming through my analysis as well. So that's where I'm at in my PhD, and I thank you all for your interest as well. I did do a scan of the market, so I found these games simply going through the iTunes store and the Google store. At that point in time, so this was 3 years ago now, there was only 4 games that I could find, and interestingly enough, they were only based in Australia. I can't give you explanation as to why that was the case, and my study is based purely on mobile. There were other games that were on other platforms, so on the web, but yeah, interesting enough, there was only 4, and they were somehow just happened to be in Australia. Yes, we did ask questions in the focus groups if they had actually played the game prior to that, and a lot of the time, a point I make in my PhD thesis is that these games seem to be supported by other outside marketing activities, and we're also doing that in our Reduce Your Juice project. You can't purely just build a game and then hope that it's going to be found on iTunes or Google Store. You actually have to have some communications or viral marketing, and then hope that the word of mouth gets around about your game, that it's engaging enough to play. It's just in beta version. So what beta version means is it's in development. That will be launched within the next coming months, but unfortunately it will only be given to a controlled trial of 1,000 participants, but we are hoping that pending results that will do really well. Fingers crossed, spending $6.5 million that it does all right. But after that, yeah, it's hoped to be broadly given to the market, yeah.
Thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Nadia.